Should show up
It is
recording.
being
There we go.
recorded.
Right. So welcome everybody to John Carroll Entrepreneurs Association and our virtual presentation. I'm Rob Felber. I think I know most of you. I am the vice chair of the association. We do have Lori Kaplan here as well as our chair, and I'm also co-chair along with Andrew Connors of the program committee. And so we're very excited to welcome Dr. Stacy Feiner, who has been to our events in the past. And I'm going to keep the introduction short because Dr. Feiner is the CEO of Synamics. Did I say that correct?
Sure did.
He's a nationally recognized business psychologist and working with a lot of private companies. And she is going to be our presenter today. So I'm going to turn it over to her just in a moment. But as a matter of housekeeping, we're going to present for about a half hour. We'll have some Q&A. And then to try to replace our in-person networking, we're going to do breakout rooms if you can stay. And those rooms will be shuffled, and Mr. Tom Bonda will be at Master Control. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Feiner. It's all yours.
Great. Hi, everybody. Let's see, what is today? Is today Monday, Tuesday?
Wednesday.
It's so hard in COVID to figure all this out. Anyway, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Rob, Tom, and all the others who have welcomed me to today's webinar. I am passionate, dedicated, fervently to private enterprise, specifically in the United States, family owned, privately owned, closely held. So that's where I have designed psychology for business. So let's really get started right here on this first slide and talk about why psychology puts you ahead. So psychology is the most sophisticated science for channeling human drive, talent, and potential. Psychology allows us to understand and direct our own decisions, positively form relationships with others, and shape the dynamics between people. Very powerful tool for business owners. When I use the word psychology, I'm referring to at least 18 aspects of human psychology, from identity to attachment, meaning to memory, emotions to attributes. But for the use in business, I mean by psychology, emotions, relationships, motivators, and performance specifically. There is healthy psychology and there is unhealthy psychology. Psychology is not the same as mental health or mental illness. We all live on the continuum of this: biology, psychology, and social belonging. And one tip that I'll start with is that's relevant to business is it's a universal human dilemma of asserting a need to assert our personal identity and a need to seek approval. And this is a tension to assert our identity and to seek approval. So this is a fundamental component of how I teach business leaders and business owners to understand psychology in their business. So I'm just moving forward here. So most owners of business feel really good about their endeavors. You're acknowledged in many ways for leadership qualities and things that others admire about you. Many wish they could be like us. But when we compare ourselves to others, there's often a profound sense of inferiority. Sometimes it's our own standards of ourselves are sometimes too high and cause us to doubt ourselves or look badly upon ourselves compared to others. And other times it's actually a lack of self-confidence. And while there are some universals, the origins of these feelings are unique to each owner. So sometimes advisors might look at a client or a business owner and say, oh, I see this, this, and this, and label them what they see. But what drives the behavior behind that is different for every owner. While the external threats are real, they're often out of our control. So psychology eradicates the internal threats so you can control what you can control and they don't hold you back. So external threats are unique and separate from internal threats. And once you understand the elements of psychology in your business, you can start to see the emotional current influencing the dynamics. And then you can streamline your leadership to manage that. I hope this is sounding intriguing. So Let me give you a visual for this quote. Everyone has a unique psychology, but few optimize it for their own success. Imagine, here's the visual. Imagine Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz wearing the ruby slippers. Imagine Glinda, the good witch, who teaches Dorothy how to use the power in her shoes. That's my role, Glinda, the good witch. And I'll show you how to use your magic slippers, your psychology, and then there's no going back. So once you understand, once you have self-awareness, there's no going back. You can't go back to ignorance. So this is very important. So I am from a family business. I founded 2 businesses, plus I co-founded my family with my husband, Peter. And then of course I birthed 2 children. I am an entrepreneur. I am an inventor. And my purpose in life is to improve the human condition, which I realized when I found songs that I had written in my guitar case from when I was 8 years old. I've always wanted to improve the human condition. And today I remain true to that aspiration, and I'm earnest about letting you know that so that I can be a resource to you in your business. So here we are with, winning happens between your ears. Military leaders say this. Athletes, professional athletes say this. Surgeons say this. Heroes say this. Heroes say that winning happens between your ears. Why is that? Because knowing yourself and the ability to do honest self-analysis allows you to trust your intuition, which many of us have forgotten. And intuition comes first, emotion comes first, and then comes action. And composure is required to have good action, and self-knowledge allows you to be composed when you take action. So this is a universal, this is a given. So today I'm not really going to talk about how to win or why to win. We all want to win. As business leaders, we want to win. There's no debate here. We're not going to do goal setting today. We are learning how to disarm your mental blockers so you can move forward, you can grow, and you can advance. And it's important to reorient ourselves. On this topic, the value of business owners, I rant about this. These are 3 relatively straightforward ways that I talk with business owners when I'm talking one-on-one and they're vacillating. Do I want to use Stacy? Do I want to do this process? Am I ready for this process? Am I the right person? Have I earned the right to have success? So I rant about this, and every one of my clients has done a 180 on their self-perception. Hopefully these points will further open you for the information that I want to share today, because my stuff works best when you realize that you can, as a business owner, and you must, as a business owner, be great. So that's a very critical point. Let's go through a couple of these. 68% of the US population is employed by us, by privately owned companies. So if we create healthy companies, our individual companies can improve the health of the nation. Collectively, private enterprise can improve the health of the nation. 86% of investors are drooling to own your companies. They wake up every day trying to figure out how they can get in touch with any one of you to figure out if they could to purchase you. So who needs who? When you think about your power in these relationships and your relevance in these relationships to investors, I help you think differently about your position. And 100% of business owners are essentially philanthropic. You're heroes. If you are employing people and you are paying taxes, you are a hero. And this needs to be recognized. And quite frankly, all of the regulatory issues that you're burdened by are really from the public companies who have made significant mistakes, creating a need to increase regulations, and private enterprise has taken on that financial burden. That being said, let me get back a little bit to my notes, because I just told you that I rant. So some of the external hurdles. COVID has absolutely kicked our ass. And these are some of the things that you can do. I'm not going to focus on surviving COVID specifically, but certainly my process and methodology has taken a back seat to the urgent needs. And these are some of the things that I've done with business owners in anticipation of the bigger work that I'm going to describe to you today. First of all, create a book of scenarios with your team and reference it. It's kind of the ISO for HR. These are, it's called scenario planning. You do it for every specific kind of threat to your business, specific to COVID per se. You create a book and you reference it, and this is what your leadership team references when surprises or you feel ambushed by a particular new policy or requirement for managing within COVID. I suggest very strongly that you use consultants proactively right now, not necessarily to shift your business or your strategy, but more as teachers to your employees. Your employees are not prepared and they will not learn on their own to live in this COVID environment. They need teachers, and you don't necessarily need to send them to a class. Bring a consultant in and have them be teachers to your employees. Your employees will not be able to adapt to the new COVID environment by themselves. Prepare to invest in training, and the training can come from your most brilliant consultants. View the challenge not as an external obstacle, but as an internal opportunity to retool your workforce. All right, so internal hurdles. Let's talk a little bit about the internal hurdles. Here, there are some of them that you can read. Every issue you face requires people skills, problem solving, interpersonal innovation, strategy, efficiencies, everything, effectiveness. Often the reason, you're not tackling some of these problems, these emotional problems, personal problems, interpersonal problems, is because even though you might be able to address one, let's say you could address the tension at home. Addressing the tension at home might set off a new set of problems that you're not necessarily prepared for. So it's kind of that concept of kicking the bear or kicking the hive, sleeping bear or kicking the hive. The value of a psychologist working with you is that unlike other advisors, business psychologists can anticipate, can prepare you, and then coach you through each of the consecutive problems as you begin to solve for the first. So again, I'm talking pretty quickly through this, but I really want to kind of slow down for a moment and suggest that a very big reason business owners are not inclined to solve for obvious problems. Maybe one is because they don't know how to solve for that obvious problem. But number two, even if they do, they anticipate consecutive issues coming from that for which they don't feel prepared. So all of this is about preparing the business owner, right? Getting your head in the game, visualizing all of the problem plus the consecutive problems so that you can prepare for them before you take action. Okay, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. If you want, at any given point, please type something into the chat room if something resonates for you. And even if I don't get it on the call today, I can follow up. But, I just want to read some of these. Tensions building at home, at work, with your team, and then with your employees, right? I mean, this is layered, especially within COVID. But it's possible you weren't addressing these problems prior to COVID. And it's possible that you won't post-COVID, if there is such a thing. It's impossible to get people to do what you expect. I mean, this could be employees, this could be, your employees' families, this could be your advisors, this could be your family members, right? I can't tell if he's being passionate or stubborn. These concepts can get really confusing. And then if you're worried that you're gonna douse compassion or passion because you're thinking it's stubborn, you might not take action. What do I do to prepare for a sale, a buyer, or wait for my kids? Staffing, orders, margins, all of these things are issues that you are struggling with and challenged by. I know because I'm working with you. So let's shift a little bit to the solutions. This is your world. You're the center of these three spheres. Many of you have kept these spheres or tried to keep these spheres separate, but that divides your attention, it divides your resources, and it overlooks the fact that there is an invisible emotional current that connects these spheres anyway. So in fact, in spite of your effort at times, perhaps to keep these things fragmented or separate, there is in a complex system, by definition, What happens in your business will impact what happens in your family, and it will impact what happens in the ownership, in your wealth. So you cannot get away from. So oftentimes, business owners will talk about, will have disproportionate attention to each one of these spheres. They'll be 110% in their business, overextended in their business. They will feel I say they, it's you and me, it's us. We might feel somewhat ineffective, maybe ignored or disempowered in our families, particularly if you have teenage children. And that can be disheartening, and you might stop asserting your leadership in your family. And in your wealth, many of us are kind of a foot in and a foot out. We're kind of in sometimes. Did we do our estate planning? Did we do our financial planning? Are we watching our retirement? Are we planning for our future? And we're kind of in and out. So we're overextended in our businesses. Sometimes we're insignificant. We feel insignificant sometimes in our families. And we are kind of half in and half out within our wealth circle. So my job is to help us see this as one ecosystem so that you have one leadership imperative to manage all of this. So this is the beginning of helping you gain control right here. My job is to help you have one mindset. You're an athlete for one sport or one athlete for 3 sports. But these interconnect. They interconnect because of you. Secondly, it's so important that you have an understanding that there is an emotional current. So there is a ripple effect. When you do something in one part of the organism, one part of this ecosystem, it will have a ripple effect into others by definition, and it's invisible. So you might see a problem somewhere else in your ecosystem and not recognize where it came from. Oftentimes, you will not recognize it came from a combination, a cluster of dynamics that happened somewhere else. So when you're unaware of this, it makes it virtually impossible for you to lead any of these 3 spheres optimally. My job is to help you lead with one mindset, one ecosystem, and all the way to the end, right? Your long-term goals. Now, keep in mind the one mindset, one ecosystem, and the one strategy. Between the ecosystem and that strategy are 7 universal stakeholder groups. And each one of those stakeholder groups often has branches of other groups. So it gets complex. It doesn't have to get complicated, but it is complex. And I want to make sure that we see that distinction. When you don't have an understanding of this, it feels complicated. When you have an understanding, you recognize the complexity, and then you use yourself, your team, your external advisors as a way of getting all your ducks in a row to facilitate your long-term goals. Another thing I want to say about this is we talk a lot about goals, and goals are, they're critical, necessary. They define the direction and the trajectory. They give us, an end point or a beacon to head towards, a North Star. Well, not a North Star, a beacon to head towards. The North Star is your aspiration. Now, any of us who had the crazy idea that we thought it would be kind of fun to start our own businesses, or really cool to take over our parents' business or to buy somebody else's business, we had an aspiration. If it wasn't an aspiration, it was a compulsion. But as soon as you get started with this entity, you speak to your lawyer, you speak to your accountant, and you get an EIN number, right? Or you're taking over somebody else's. And so your aspiration or your compulsion quickly turns into a commodity or an asset. And the aspiration over time for starting this or taking it over becomes more and more diluted and more difficult to be inspired by. So part of this work is to identify the original aspiration. That comes from before. And what's in the future is the goals. So what we're doing is we're connecting. We begin to connect your aspiration for why you started this crazy thing to begin with, or took it over, or why you keep it, and what the goals are, the long-term goals are. What else do I want to say a little bit about? So you're in the center of this. And this is where it's really important, again, for you to recognize why you can't afford not to see the emotional current that directs, that the invisible emotional current that directs and shapes the relationships within this ecosystem. So write down any questions. I'm going to move to the next slide. It will continue to talk about this, but it will we'll get a little bit more. Hold on, let me get my notes here. Okay, so here are the elements. I want to just talk a little bit about the elements, of course, right? So quickly, my notes just help me stay organized here because there's so much here and I'm so passionate about it and I'm good at it. Each sphere has a core set of emotional elements. Ignoring them often sets in motion and reactions and decisions that you're unaware of. Many times they compete with your stated goals. And seeing them in context gives you a chance to address them effectively, shape the relationships in the way that's more effective, most effective, and then direct the energy. So let's just take a little look at this. So I want to start talking about a client that I brought in so you can kind of get a sense of this. So Adam comes into the business here. Let me just, again, stay organized for all of you because I am a circular thinker. Hold on one moment. So Adam and Brian come in to talk a little bit about their needs. Adam and Brianna, they're siblings and they're preparing to take over their dad's business. The dad's about 75, Adam's 43, Brianna's 38, and they're asking for me for leadership coaching. They want to understand their individual leadership styles. They want to learn some leadership competencies, and they want to develop skills for managing people. All these very positive and valuable things to be asking for. But as I listen in each of the conversations, here's what I could discover. I discover that the siblings are harboring some ill will towards each other. Not major, nothing that I don't think that they can overcome, but if it's not addressed, it will become a festering issue. The older brother, Adam, was very deferential to his father. He perceived himself to be very respectful, but what I was really seeing and hearing was fear and insecurity. So, okay, so here's a psychological misunderstanding. He was feeling and he was talking about being deferential to his dad, which is why he wasn't asking for too much authority or enough authority. Yet, what was really happening was he was afraid to ask for more authority. He was afraid of his dad, and he didn't think he was ready. The younger sister, Brianna, was very serious about her position leading quality and engineering. Pretty substantial portion of the business. They do product development and they produce consumer products. But she expected that all the comp and the perks of her older brother, who was the president, was going to be would be hers as well, because she was family. Okay, so innocently, you're sitting here talking with somebody and they're making some basic assumptions about what is due them because they're family. But what they were confusing was that employment in a family business is different than ownership. And without that clarity, expectations can get very overlapped. So as we were meeting, so the third meeting, so I met with each of them individually. In the third meeting, as we were meeting, there was an issue with their sales leader, more the age of the dad than the siblings, and it erupted. And it was very, very clear that neither Brianna or Adam had the confidence nor the autonomy to handle the crisis without their father, and he was ailing. So here we had this scenario where they were trying to figure out where they were on this visual. They were family, right? They were family members. They had employment in the business. and they were coming up at some point to have ownership. And soon they would be in that center structure. But the father had not yet talked about transitioning or transferring, excuse me, transitioning is different than transferring, had not yet decided on transferring stock. So there were a lot of expectations without a lot of clarity. And also both Brianna and Adam were asking for leadership competencies. They weren't looking at ownership expectations or how to be a good steward of the company, how to transition from their father, how to take over and comfortably, slowly shield their father or insulate their father. And so these were the complexities. So as we began to look at this graph, we started to say, okay, let's look at what the issues are. What are the imperatives that we need to talk about in terms of the family? What does the business mean to the family? Now, there were two other siblings who were not represented as employees, but they were going to be owners. So again, we needed to start thinking about what our expectations were for the board, for governance. And as of now, or as of the time that I was working with them, governance really was defined by the bylaws and the operating agreement. So there's always governance, even if you don't have a formal board, either a family board or an external board. The governance of the company is based on bylaws and operating agreements and other legal documents. So to bring those alive, you need to bring people to the table. We were also thinking that we were going to need a board of advisors to help these two young family members take over and give confidence to their father that would be viable. You know, that when as he was ailing, that he had a board that represented his vision for the company, even though we were talking about how the culture of the vision and the culture of the company gets transitioned from one generation to the next, but how the business gets operated is up for the new generation. And when we started to discern and differentiate and discern these kinds of concepts, this whole graph became so, this Venn diagram became so useful because everything about what they needed to manage landed right here. So we began to talk about what the business meant to the family so that the family would not be competing with the business. We talked about the culture and the innovation and the productivity of the business, so the business wouldn't be working against the family. And we talked about how to put a board in place so we would, number one, the most important thing of a private board is to eradicate, manage risk of what? Conflict of interest, right? So that we were focused on the wealth engine, preserving the wealth engine for the family and the next generation. One of the other concepts that we talked about for this family was rather than worrying about working for their dad, they really collectively were working for their children, right? The next generation, that they were stewarding the business for the next generation, not perpetuating the needs or the expectations of the father who was now turning the business owner over. The last point I'll make about why this is so important is there are 7 stakeholders and stakeholder groups, and ultimately they can, if they don't have a voice, they will inadvertently or purposefully work against the long-term goal of the owner. And that would be, again, the family, the business, and the ownership. They all have their own agendas. If you can see in these other 4 circles, you have the next generation. So developing this group of family members who are also employees, perhaps pre-ownership. You have governance between the family and the ownership. And how do you develop a shared vision? How do you give voice to a family council, create a family council? So again, you're capturing not just concerns, but innovations. And then strategy, really the business And the ownership, again, where governance is, that's the place that leads strategy. So what's really important here is that you can see that you have the ability to have a single mindset, see the whole ecosystem right there, right in front of you, almost better than one-page financial statement, right? You can see all the players right here and create plans so that you are in front of the demands, the expectations, and the needs. And finally, to define your long-term goals. So all of this emotional current is being directed in the same direction. And finally, the process. I share with you the process because I think it's valuable in however you take yourselves from here to the future. Is the space of conceptualize is where there's the most psychology at play. Here's where the business owner sits down like an elite athlete and visualizes the course, visualizes the long game. We promise to take no action. So there's no fear that I might set something in motion, not I, the business owner, might set something in motion that they are not fully prepared to see through. Because the worst thing possible is to set initiatives in motion and then not fulfill those objectives, not to complete them or see them to fulfillment. And so conceptualize involves a psychological process of getting the business owner with an aligned mindset. And there are 6 stages to that, but the most important thing, so that's the most important thing, is to get their head in the game, to get to get assumptions out of the way and to open up to new thinking. Number 2, to get fears and hangups resolved so that they don't hijack or sabotage the process. And this isn't therapy, so you're not necessarily going to resolve old conflicts. We're neutralizing them. If you have a conflict with a family member that happened 20 years ago, there's no possibility of resolution. That relationship has taken shape based on a reality that was unique to those 2 people, but we can neutralize it. And we can say, okay, here we are, adults, 20 years from that person and those perspectives. And we can say, what do we want for ourselves going forward? And this is a phenomenally valuable process. It can happen between a CFO and a COO who have lingering problems. But neutralizing conflict happens for a chronic conflict, and resolution happens for an acute, a situational conflict. So we visualize, we do some psychological conditioning, mental conditioning in this space, and we also address 6 universal obstacles. We address the 6 universal obstacles that always come up in every meeting about why we can't do this, or if we do this, I won't be able to accomplish any one of these 6 because of new sets of problems that will come about. And that's a terrible reason not to problem solve. I can't get my top salesperson to perform, to act kindly, because if I do, he or she will leave. So you don't do anything because you're afraid they'll leave. Well, that's between a rock and a hard place. That's not seeing that's like, you have to pull apart these 2 rocks and hard places. You have to pull them apart and see all of the steps that you can take to move that problem along without hijacking your own long-term goals and not being afraid. So that happens in conceptualize. Strategize is your first circle of people that you get on board. So you bring your thoughts from conceptualize, what you really want, what you want to visualize. Then you strategize with your first team. Your first team are the people who are basically employed. They're the first team of people who are on a regular basis helping you execute your long-term goal. Facilitate is the second circle out, which is your advisors. A lot of times, and this is why my percentages at the beginning were so important. A lot of times business owners feel beholden to their consultants, when in fact their consultants should really be beholden to us. And we need to figure out how to facilitate these advisors as a team, much like we might facilitate our management team. But if you're not good at managing your management team, you can imagine how difficult it must be to orchestrate and create collaboration with facilitate this third team. But it's always critical for privately held businesses to have a really solid group of advisors to fill the gap, to round out the team. And without going too much into it, you're the buyer, you're the customer, and there's a psychological strategy for getting you in control of this whole system. And then we execute. We execute with all of your ducks in a row. And typically the first round is about a year. We need to kind of work through a number of different, so right now I finally got this team. Well, I didn't finally, I'd only been working with them for a short period of time, but they finally got a plan to produce $1.7 million in back orders. So they were confounded by 4 staffing organizations. They were confounded by some HR challenges. They're confounded by the fact that they can't find good employees. And they were really at a stalemate. And so we just recently put this plan. We just did conceptualizing with the business owner, and now we're in strategize, and we've just discovered the first low-hanging fruit to accomplish the production of the 1.7 million in backlog. So this is the process. I just want to go back and let you see this one more time. This is your ecosystem. You're in the center of it. You cannot look over your shoulder and expect anybody else to do what you need to do. And quite frankly, there is no other president of any other organization that has more power than you to do everything you want. I often say to business owners, if you own a business, you have everything you need to accomplish everything you want. You don't do it alone. You can't do it alone. You need a psychologist. Finally, I was just going to tell a story, but I think I might be short on time. So here's what I want to leave with all of you. I want to leave with do some honest self-analysis. And then I want you to call me. I believe everybody who stands in front of you for a half an hour preaching, let's just say educating, teaching something that I'm passionate about, I'm supposed to provoke you. I'm not supposed to inspire you. Inspiration gets agreement. I'm not looking for agreement. I'm looking to help you think for yourself. So anybody who has strong opinions about what I've said, feelings about what I've said, disbelief, ready to act, you have my time and you have my ear. And here's some of the things, if you want to come prepared, that you might want to think about. What one single problem have you been unable to solve for that's just gnawing at you, keeps you up at night, or actually you've kind of stopped thinking about because it's in your family, it's in your business, or it's in your ownership circle? Then think about, how long have you lived with this problem? When did the situation turn into something that felt unsolvable? Again, you'll have to give some thought to what problem you want to start thinking about this for, but maybe there are several. How have you tried to solve for it? So what attempts haven't worked, or what got in the way? And then what has not fixing the problem cost you? The tangible costs, financially, what does it cost you? But what are the intangible costs? When your CFO or your COO knows you're not going to do anything about it, and they've stopped having any concern for the problem. When your inability or your unwillingness or your blind spot to move something forward in an effective way has really emotional effects, negative emotional effects on the rest of the organization. What is it costing you? We could talk this through together. Or you could come with some questions about this, but I'd like you to test me. Give me a test, and then I'll test you back. And so here are some of the members of my team, and this is how you can be in touch with me. And thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you, Stacy. Certainly given us a lot to think about, and you guys can unmute yourselves and we'll ask questions, and I'll maybe kick it off as it relates to my business, but it's usually in other people's businesses. We work primarily with manufacturers in the business-to-business sector. They're almost always privately held and very often family owned. And as we start to strike up a relationship with one person, usually a national sales person or VP in sales or marketing, oftentimes it's another sibling that might be the president or the CEO, and oftentimes they're engineers. So put all your predisposed thoughts on what engineers are like, and my no intent of insulting any engineers here, Chip, but oftentimes that person that we're talking to in sales that is like, my brother, my sister just won't listen to me. They're this, they're that. They have their ways of doing it, and they're asking us outside of, hey,
Right.
you have this person, Dr. Feiner, you can talk to. Outside of that, we're often put in a position as part of the consulting team to give them strategies, or, well, can you talk to your brother about this or that? And of course, a lot of that's relating to getting the decision makers all in the same place. But we get thrown into these tension situations between family members, and sometimes they come at you independently at different times. I don't know if that's something that you can address a little bit.
Well, so, it's family businesses are the, family businesses often get labeled as too difficult, too hard to work with, so erratic, and compared to public companies, which are, so bureaucratic, right? I mean, you can't. So I guess the simplest thing to advise is encourage that person to think about a different approach to addressing or coming up with a solution with this, I guess it's a little broad, Rob. I mean, on the one hand, I would say, yeah, put me on a call and let's explore you and the salesperson's sister. What are the issues that are getting in the way? I mean, do you ever have access, Rob, to getting to the owner or the CEO?
Oh, yeah. Oftentimes we are, but I mean, again, sometimes it's just conflicts or other decision makers that whether they be blocking on an idea or that. Yeah, oftentimes I see it with a younger sibling, as you described in the other situation.
Right.
Where,
So
okay,
I think, so I think that just a couple of things. First of all, definitely a unique approach. So you might want to play interference with that. I mean, I remember working, I was sitting with 5 siblings, the CEO, and then the 4 other brothers. And this one brother was basically mentioning again that he wanted to figure out how he could sell his share because he was ready to retire. And the rest of the brothers kind of listened, and then they stopped thinking about it because they didn't have a solution. And finally I said, geez, you guys, I mean, John here, it sounds like he's whining. It must be incredibly annoying that he keeps whining about wanting to sell his share so he can retire. And they all laughed, and John's looking completely offended. And then I looked at the other brothers and I said, but equally as distasteful is you're ignoring a very reasonable and important question. So it's, so you're ignoring your brother causes him to sound like he's whining, and your brother's ability to influence you on getting this done causes him to look at you as, as blocking his future. So how do you get through this? I think in this particular case, they solved the problem at that meeting. Their CFO was at the meeting, and we figured it out pretty quickly, and we went on to the next thing. But I think really, Rob, another way of thinking about it is that oftentimes, the problem that you're trying to solve is really a symptom. And what you really need to be doing is talking about the dynamic. So if you're sitting with the sister and the brother, I suppose, Rob, you could say, you know, we've talked about this a number of times. It seems like it's not the idea of, you know, this initiative. It seems like you guys aren't listening to each other. And sometimes as soon as you talk about what the problem is, you name the problem, you help the siblings in this case. You give words to something that they're not allowed to talk about. So
I think it's important to, yeah, separate what's prompting the discussion, whether it's techniques or challenges or solutions.
the business
versus
problem with the
their
dynamics.
relationship. So that's helpful.
Right,
All right,
separating the
so-
business problem. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so anybody else, you know, come off mute and who's got other questions that they have? This isn't normally a quiet group, so don't make me call on you by name.
Well, I mean, has anybody ever taken has anybody taken psychology in school? Does anybody wish they were a psychologist? I mean, I often hear business owners saying, geez, I wish I were a psychologist. And I said, well, you don't have to wish, you could have one. I could be in your back pocket.
What,
mean, you
what
have-
other challenges? I know Jeff, you brought something up about, and I posted something similar to Chad about culture and employees and how certain events intrude on the business environment. I don't know if you're still with us, but that's something you would want to talk about, Jeff? No? Who else is here? Mark, what's going on in your business?
Is that Mark Rashawn you're calling on?
Yeah, I'm trying to call people out. He's
Hey,
gotta
Marky
come
Mark.
up.
Hey, did you have a chili party this year? I bet you've had to postpone that, huh, Mark?
It's been postponed a little bit.
Bummer.
I
It
was
doesn't mean you
finally able to go.
Doesn't mean you
canceled.
can't make it. You can still make your chili, just can't share it.
You know, I always have my share of HR issues that you know, maybe the training is so varied from most of what we do is very one-to-one, and so therefore it's very inconsistent from employee to employee. So there is a direct relationship. The people that have probably received the most training are a little bit more consistent in their decision-making process, and then at the other end, it's all over the place. So that's always kind of an issue of how to maybe get more training, I'll say, to the less trained people. And then, you know, currently right now, I'm actually working with also then slightly different would be a new salesperson. That's a little bit not quite the same training. It's a little bit different issue. Requires some training, but it's a little bit more of the ones and zeros of what we do, and not necessarily
Right.
How client management and other things of that nature.
Right. Well, I think so thanks. It's good to see you, Mark, and thanks for just sharing. So, you know, we have a little bit of material to work with, but, you know, with regard to HR issues, two things. One is a quick story. Maybe you know a guy by the name of Jack Welch. Rest his soul. Unfortunately, we lost him. But Jack Welch popularized talent management in the early 1980s. And, you know, it sent shockwaves through industry because he had a very cutthroat approach to managing talent. And essentially, in a nutshell, basically, he had every manager force rank their direct reports, and then he would cut the 10% every year. The story there was if you weren't moving up every 2 years, you were falling behind. Well, what happened over the years is lots of public companies like PepsiCo and other types of companies repeated or copied that strategy and it worked for many companies. But for private companies, we kind of got the fragments, right? We learned, oh, do performance reviews and cut the 10% and, make sure you have clear goals and objectives. But it came down to us in a rather fragmented way. And we have been private companies have been perpetually disappointed with the lack of a good formula for managing our talent from the time they come in to the time they get promoted or leave. So there, and also business owners are pretty hopeless because we believe, if there were a solution to managing talent effectively, they'd have it. So if they don't have it, if none of us on the phone have a good system, it must be that it doesn't exist. And two things are true about this. One is we took the wrong message from Jack Welch. The message from Jack Welch wasn't to copy his process. The message was he had the audacity, the confidence to build his own talent management system to serve his goals for the company. So lots of us tried to copy him, but that wasn't the plan. The point was to have the audacity to create our own talent management process. That's number one. And number two, well, I can't actually remember, but so there is a process. You have to take the time to first of all, that visual, I don't know if you like the visual, Mark, of the, just nod because I can see you, or shake if the three circle. There is such a thing as a visual for talent management. There are 9 centers of excellence, and you build each one of those centers of excellence to tie in, kind of like your anatomy, like the neck bone's connected to the backbone's connected to the hip bone. It's all connected. It has its own its own purpose, but it's all connected. And you can start with what you probably have, which is recruiting and some HR compliance and probably some performance management. And you can start with those, and that informs the other 6 or 7 centers of excellence. And it becomes what Jim Collins talks about as a flywheel. But like lots of other things, in order to fix a problem, you have to set out some time to solve for it. And that brings me to this other point, is that the things that I'm talking about need to be budgeted for. These are CapEx projects. Like if you were building an 80,000 square foot new warehouse, you'd budget for it. If you were putting your product mark into India, you'd budget for it. If you were introducing a new ERP for a couple $1 million, you'd budget for it. The things that I'm talking about, you budget for, right? You create a CapEx. And you dedicate time and resources to accomplish it. And I guess the last thing I would say is, again, consultants are your friend. You dial us up, you dial us down, you hold us to very high standards, right? And you don't have any overhead from us. And then because we're not part of the bureaucracy, right? We're not part of your team, we can continue to provide you with personal consultation to the CEO, because I'm having access to your people. So we're very, and we're not overhead, right? We don't have an office. We don't have benefits. So I really do encourage you at this time to consider rounding out your team and creating solutions with consultants. And one of the values for me, and Mark, I know you, is, you and I could talk about what it is you need so that you could then go to these advisors or these consultants and say, this is what I'm looking for. So I could help you shop for the kind of consultant that does the kind of work. And listen, you're a consultant, so you know too. You know how this goes. So thanks for the question.
Mm-hmm.
There was one question, Jeff. I don't know if you wanted to come off mute and ask your question. In your vote.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Something I've been facing probably about the last 6 months is we're hiring a lot of young people in our warehouse, and one in particular is a college graduate we hired to work out in our distribution center. She was rather vocal, stands out, very outgoing. We invited her to be on the employee action committee. And she's really trying to radicalize the entire committee. She thinks they're entitled to things. She's making demands. We had a situation where an employee went home sick, and she assumed that employee must have COVID and demanded to know what was going on and what was happening with this person. I about had it with her. And we've really never had that problem in the past, but she's college educated. She's very opinionated, very radicalized. Feels we should have flex hours, is trying to tell us how to run our business. We provide 100% of the employees' insurance, and she's still dictating that it should be better. And this is the first time she's ever had insurance. But yet, I'm getting to the point where I've about had enough. And I think some of the other employees, especially the older employees, have had enough. But I do realize that if I ever took action and released her, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind she would take legal action, whether deserved or not. And how do you handle that?
Well, first of all, you have to be aware that there are a lot of people who make legal claims that don't have any bearing. So I don't know that I would necessarily, there might be a risk that she do that, but might not be a real threat.
Oh, you may win the war, but the battle costs money.
So, of course, I think this is a really good question for somebody on your team, like some legal counsel, that I think is always important. But I think too, there might be something to learn from this. And again, I don't know the circumstances. It sounds awful, quite frankly. And it sounds like, you could, make some points and expect change within a period of time. And if you don't see it, you could essentially let her go, fire her for insubordination or other types of things. But nonetheless, it might be, here's some 3 or 4 questions that I might ask a person like that. One is, I might be curious if they're from a family business, or if they have business people in their background, who has kind of made them hypervigilant about mistrusting employees. I might pose some questions about where did you learn to first mistrust people and their intentions, and how do you think mistrusting employees at the outset will create will backfire for you? What are your expectations from leadership? And I would say, I don't know, probably a couple other questions just to kind of get some, I had some other questions in mind, but just to prepare this person with questions that indicate your dissatisfaction and your concern that the approach that she's taking, number 1, goes against the culture, but number 2 is working against her. And and then the other thing I was going to say is, how can you benefit from her innovative thinking? You could benefit from her innovative thinking if she would change her approach. But you could begin to say innovative thinking and aggressive behavior doesn't always necessarily lead to the outcomes that she wants.
Yeah, I don't perceive her as, I haven't agreed with any of her rationalization or what she's come up with. And I guess my concern is I've got to be careful what questions I ask her and what legally I can ask her and how she may perceive that. And I don't want to build a case. Her work performance is fine. It's just she's getting everybody else worked up, and she's rather demanding. So then that's not
good work performance, because performance is the equation of culture, adherence to culture, and productivity. So you might be saying her productivity is good, but her ability to fit culture or her adherence to certain norms of the business are flagrant. So performance is 2 things. It's not one thing. Performance is adherence to the culture and productivity. And when you can separate that, you could talk with her about that. Your productivity is good, but your ability to collaborate and work effectively with your peers and with your direct reports is substandard. It's inadequate.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, we're just about wrapping up. I know we talked about breakout groups, but I think we're down to our core folks here now. A lot of people messaged that they had other, 4:45s and 5 o'clock Zooms. So I don't relish them having to be on Zoom anymore. Any more questions for Stacy before we sign off? All right. Well, thank you everybody that's still here, and for those that are wondering who Rebecca is, Becky Cole is a new account manager at my company, Felber PR. So, and there was a couple other new names that we hadn't seen before on our calls. So this is the Motley Crew, and ignore everything Vonda says, and whatever Kat says is true. So I just turned my
Thanks,
video off.
Felber.
So thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
We
Please feel
can
free to call.
we can wrap up for the day. We are planning additional speakers, so watch your email as we finalize the next couple speakers. And we thank everybody for coming today. If there's no further questions, thank you.
One more quick
Thanks.
comment. We will be sending out a couple of requests. We're gonna need some judges and some mentors coming up. It will probably be done, it will be done on Zoom, so watch your email for that also if you would.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for
Thank you.